Have you ever been looked at like you were invisible? Like you were just a piece of furniture in a room full of important people? Kelsey Bennett knew that look. It was the look she got every night at the Azure Vault, New York's most exclusive restaurant. But when Grant Caldwell, a billionaire famous for destroying companies and careers, snapped his fingers at her and mocked her intelligence in front of his board of directors, he made a fatal calculation. He didn't know that the woman pouring his vintage Cabernet wasn't just a waitress. She was the one person in the room who held the key to saving his empire and destroying it. This is the story of how a waitress silenced a billionaire and why you should never judge a book by its cover. The Azure Vault didn't just smell like money, it smelled like old money. It was a scent composed of mahogany, truffled reduction, and the faint, metallic tang of anxiety that radiates from men who have leveraged everything on a single dinner. Kelsey Bennett adjusted the collar of her white shirt, checking her reflection in the polished brass of the kitchen doors. Her eyes were tired. Not the sleepy kind of tired, but the bone-deep exhaustion that comes from working double shifts for 3 years straight while watching your dreams collect dust in a storage unit in Queens. "Table 4 is yours, Bennett," the maître d', Henri, snapped, not looking up from his reservation tablet. "VIP, don't embarrass me." "Who is it?" Kelsey asked, balancing a tray of crystal water glasses. "Grant Caldwell and his acquisition team." Kelsey felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. Grant Caldwell, the CEO of Caldwell Constance Capital, the man the Wall Street Journal called the Wolf of West 57th. He wasn't just a billionaire, he was a predator. He bought struggling tech firms, gutted their staff to boost the stock price, and sold the carcasses for parts. Kelsey knew him for a different reason. 5 years ago, before the medical bills, before her father's stroke, and before she had to drop out of her PhD program at MIT, she had written a thesis on predictive algorithmic anomalies. Caldwell's firm had been one of the case studies. She knew his business model better than he knew his own children's birthdays. "Understood," Kelsey said, masking her distaste. She pushed through the swinging doors and entered the dining room. The Azure Vault was dimly lit, designed to make everyone look younger and richer. Table 4 was the prime spot, center stage, yet private enough for conspiracy. Grant Caldwell sat at the head of the table. He was younger than he looked in magazines, perhaps early 40s, with a jawline that looked like it had been chiseled out of granite and eyes that scanned the room with bored precision. He was flanked by 3 other men in suits that cost more than Kelsey's annual rent. As Kelsey approached, Caldwell was in the middle of a story. "So I told the regulator, if you want to audit the offshore holdings, bring a shovel, because they're buried under layers of shell core you can't even pronounce." The men laughed. It was a sycophantic, ugly sound. Kelsey stepped up to the table, her movement silent and practiced. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to the Azure Vault. May I start you with—" Caldwell didn't look at her. He didn't even pause his breath. He simply held up a hand, palm out, silencing her as if she were a malfunctioning radio. "Not now," he said to the man on his right, ignoring Kelsey completely. "I want the 82 Latour, and tell the kitchen if the Wagyu is over medium rare. I'm buying the building and firing everyone." He finally turned his head slightly, his eyes glossing over Kelsey's face as if she were transparent. "You got that, sweetheart? 82 Latour. Don't bring me the 86 by mistake. The 86 has too much tannin structure for the steak. Try to keep up." Kelsey stood frozen for a microsecond. It wasn't the rudeness, she was used to that. It was the condescension. The assumption that she wouldn't know the difference between a 1982 and a 1986 vintage, or that she couldn't comprehend the concept of tannins. "Of course, Mr. Caldwell," Kelsey said, her voice steady, cool and perfectly professional. The Chateau Latour 1982, an excellent choice. It has developed a perfect balance of cedar and graphite notes over the last 40 years. Caldwell stopped talking. He looked at her then, really looked at her, for the first time. His eyes narrowed, searching for sarcasm. Finding none, he gave a dismissive grunt. "Just bring the bottle, and open it here. I don't trust the sommelier." Kelsey nodded and retreated. As she walked away, she heard one of the associates, a heavy-set man named Miller, chuckle. She used the word graphite, Grant. Maybe she reads the back of the bottle. "She's a waitress, Miller." Caldwell's voice carried, loud and arrogant. "She repeats what she hears. It's mimicry, not intelligence. Like a parrot. Or a monkey." Kelsey's grip on the serving tray tightened until her knuckles turned white. She walked into the wine cellar, the cool air hitting her flushed face. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a mathematician. She was a survivor. And tonight, Grant Caldwell was going to wish he had kept his mouth shut. The dinner service dragged on like a slow suffocation. Kelsey moved around table 4 with the precision of a ghost, refilling glasses, clearing plates, and becoming part of the background. She listened. They weren't just eating. They were working. Caldwell was orchestrating a hostile takeover of a renewable energy firm called Helios Dynamics. "The valuation is all smoke and mirrors," Caldwell said, cutting into his steak with surgical aggression. "Helios claims their new battery tech increases efficiency by 40%, but their Q3 projected earnings are based on a subsidy that the Senate is about to kill next week. We short the stock on Monday, wait for the subsidy bill to fail on Wednesday, and buy the company for pennies on the dollar by Friday." Miller nodded, wiping grease from his lip. "It's brilliant, Grant. But what if the subsidy passes? The algorithm predicts a 60% chance of passage." "The algorithm is based on public sentiment," Caldwell scoffed, taking a long sip of the Latour. "I have dinner with Senator Reynolds tomorrow. The subsidy is dead. The public just doesn't know it yet. That's why we win. We know what the little people don't." Kelsey was pouring water for the third man, a nervous, younger executive named Peterson. Her hand paused. She knew Helios Dynamics. She had been following their patent filings for months, purely out of intellectual curiosity. She also knew the math behind the subsidy bill. "Excuse me," Peterson said, looking up at Kelsey. "Can we get some more bread?" "Certainly," Kelsey said. "Wait," Caldwell interrupted. He was drunk on power and expensive wine. He leaned back, loosening his tie. He looked at Kelsey, a cruel smirk playing on his lips. He wanted to show off for his boys. He wanted to demonstrate his dominance over everything in his orbit, from the market to the help. "Tell me, darling," Caldwell sneered, pointing a fork at her. "You look like a smart girl. You know how to count tips, right?" The table went quiet. It was an unnecessary, brutal jab. Kelsey turned slowly. "I'm quite good with numbers, sir." "Good," Caldwell laughed. "Then here's a math problem for you. If I have $1 billion and I pay you minimum wage, how many lifetimes would you have to work to afford this bottle of wine?" The men snickered. It was the oldest, cheapest power play in the book. Humiliate the server to feel like a king. Kelsey didn't flinch. She placed the water pitcher down on the side table. The restaurant noise seemed to fade away. She looked Grant Caldwell dead in the eye. "That depends, Mr. Caldwell," Kelsey said, her voice raising just enough to carry over the clinking silverware of the nearby tables. "Depends on what?" Caldwell challenged, amused. "It depends on whether you retain your $1 billion after next Friday," Kelsey said. The smile vanished from Caldwell's face. "Excuse me?" Kelsey shouldn't have done it. She needed this job. She needed the health insurance for her mother, but the parrot comment from earlier was still burning in her chest. "You're shorting Helios Dynamics based on the failure of the Senate subsidy," Kelsey said, her tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. "You're assuming the stock will crash when the bill dies, but you've missed a variable in the equation." Caldwell stared at her. The silence at the table was deafening. And what would a waitress know about shorting derivatives? "I know that Helios didn't file their Q3 projections based on the US subsidy," Kelsey said, her mind shifting into the gear she hadn't used since MIT. "I read their patent filing in the European registry this morning. They just licensed their battery tech to the German automotive sector. The deal was signed yesterday. It's not public yet because of the time zone difference in filing." She took a step closer to the table. "When the market opens on Monday, Helios stock isn't going to drop because of the US Senate, Mr. Caldwell. It's going to triple because of the German contract. If you short that stock on Monday morning, you won't just lose the deal. You'll be margin called by noon. You'll lose about $300 million in 4 hours. Kelsey picked up the empty bread basket. "So, to answer your question, I would have to work many lifetimes to afford this wine. But if you make that trade on Monday, you won't be able to afford it either." For 10 seconds, nobody breathed. Miller's fork was halfway to his mouth. Peterson looked terrified. Grant Caldwell sat frozen. His face went from red to a pale, chalky white. He pulled his phone out of his pocket under the table, frantically typing. He was checking the European patent registry. Kelsey watched his thumb scroll. She watched his eyes widen. He looked up at her, the arrogance gone, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated shock. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I'm just the waitress, sir," Kelsey said. "I'll go get your bread." She turned and walked away, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She knew she had just signed her resignation letter, but as she pushed through the kitchen doors, she didn't feel fear. She felt the first spark of a fire that had been out for a long time. But Grant Caldwell wasn't the type of man to let a mystery walk away, and he certainly wasn't the type of man to let someone humiliate him without a fight. Kelsey had silenced him, yes, but she had also put a target on her back. The silence at table 4 was heavier than the marble tabletop. Grant Caldwell stared at the screen of his phone, the blue light reflecting in his widened pupils. His thumb hovered over the refresh button on the European Patent Office's mobile portal. "Grant?" Miller asked tentatively, his voice trembling slightly. "Grant, surely you're not listening to a waitress. She's probably high or crazy." "German automotive sector, please. She just wanted to scare you." Grant didn't answer. He tapped the screen. The page reloaded. There it was, filing number EP42901, assignee Helios Dynamics, licensee Wilkner Automotive Group, Berlin. Date, yesterday, 16:30. CCT. Grant felt the blood drain from his face. It was real. The timestamp confirmed it. If he had executed his short sell on Monday morning as planned, he would have walked directly into a buzzsaw. The German deal would be announced at 9:00 a.m. Berlin time on Monday, 3:00 a.m. in New York. By the time the markets opened on Wall Street, Helios stock wouldn't just hold steady, it would skyrocket. He did the mental math instantly. His leverage ratio was 10-1. If the stock doubled, his position would be wiped out. He would have lost $340 million of the firm's capital. It would have been the end of Caldwell Constance. He looked up at the kitchen door where Kelsey had disappeared. His heart was pounding, not from fear anymore, but from the adrenaline of a near-miss collision. "Miller," Grant said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. "Yes, Grant?" "Shut up." Grant stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He signaled Henri, the maitre d'. Henri rushed over, sensing the change in atmosphere. He looked panic-stricken, assuming the food was bad. "Mr. Caldwell, is everything to your satisfaction? I can have the chef." "The waitress," Grant cut him off. "Table 4. "What is her name?" Henry's face soured. "Bennett? Did she spill something? Did she speak out of turn?" "I apologize profusely, sir. She is difficult. I will fire her immediately." "If you fire her," Grant said, stepping closer to Henri until he was looming over the smaller man, "I will buy this building, evict this restaurant, and turn it into a parking garage. Do you understand me?" Henry blinked, mouth gaping. I... Bring me her employment file. Now. And bring me the check. We're leaving." 5 minutes later, Grant was sitting in the back of his Rolls-Royce Phantom, idling at the curb outside the Azure Vault. The rain had started to fall, blurring the neon city lights. In his hand, he held a photocopy of a thin personnel file. Name: Kelsey Elizabeth Bennett. Age: 26. Address: a cramped apartment complex in Queens. Education: high school valedictorian. MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. BS in mathematics, summa cum laude. MIT, PhD candidate in computational algorithmic theory. Status: incomplete, withdrawn. Grant stared at the word withdrawn. He flipped the page. There was a note from her background check. Father deceased. Stroke. Mother: Elizabeth Bennett, currently residing in assisted care. Sloan Kettering Oncology Unit, outpatient. The puzzle pieces clicked together with a sickening clarity. The medical bills, the withdrawal from the PhD program, the double shifts at a high-end restaurant where the tips were cash and immediate. She wasn't uneducated. She was overqualified for every room she walked into. But she was trapped in an economic cage. And he, Grant Caldwell, the man who prided himself on seeing value where others saw nothing, had treated her like she was brain-dead. "Driver," Grant said, staring out the window at the service entrance of the restaurant. "Yes, sir. Home?" "No," Grant said. "Kill the engine. We wait." It was 1:30 a.m. when Kelsey pushed open the heavy steel service door and stepped out into the alley. The rain was coming down in sheets now, cold and biting. She pulled her thin coat tighter around herself. Her feet throbbed in her non-slip shoes. She had been fired. Henry hadn't cared about the nuances. He just knew that Grant Caldwell had asked for her file, and to Henry, that meant trouble. He had told her to clear out her locker before the dessert course was even served. Stupid, Kelsey muttered to herself, kicking a puddle. Stupid pride. She had saved a billionaire's fortune, and her reward was unemployment. She checked her bank account on her cracked phone screen. $424. Her mum's medication copay was $350 due on Tuesday. She had $62 left for food and subway fare. She walked toward the street, head down against the wind. A pair of headlights blinded her. A sleek, black car was parked directly in front of the alley exit. The rear window rolled down with a silent, electronic hum. "Get in," a voice said from the darkness of the back seat. Kelsey stopped. She recognized the voice. The anger flared up again, hot and instant. "Go to hell, Mr. Caldwell." She started to walk past the car. The rear door opened, and Grant Caldwell stepped out into the rain. He wasn't wearing an umbrella. His expensive Italian suit was getting soaked instantly, but he didn't seem to care. "I'm not asking," Grant said, his voice raising over the sound of the rain. "I'm offering you a ride and a conversation." "I don't talk to men who treat people like furniture," Kelsey shouted back, not stopping. "I read your file, Kelsey," Grant called out. That stopped her. She froze, her back to him. The rain plastered her hair to her cheeks. She turned slowly. "You have no right." MIT, Grant listed, walking toward her. Specialization in predictive anomalies. You were working on the chaos theory in financial markets before you dropped out. You were the youngest candidate in the department. I didn't drop out, Kelsey said, her voice shaking with a mix of rage and shame. I left. Because of your mother. Kelsey stared at him. If you mention her, I swear to God I will hit you. Grant stopped 3 feet away from her. The rain dripped from his nose. He looked different than he had in the restaurant. The arrogance was still there, but the boredom was gone. He looked intense, hungry. You saved me $340 million tonight, Grant said, and you did it while pouring water and taking insults from a moron like Miller. I didn't do it for you, Kelsey spat. I did it because you were wrong, and I hate it when the math is wrong. A ghost of a smile touched Grant's lips. Exactly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a check. He held it out to her. It was wet, but the ink was waterproof. $50,000, Grant said. Consulting fee. For tonight. Kelsey looked at the check. It was more money than she made in 2 years. It would pay for her mum's chemo for 6 months. It would pay the rent. She reached for it, her hand trembling. Then she pulled back. I don't want your charity, she said. It's not charity, Grant snapped, his eyes flashing. It's a down payment. You're fired from the restaurant, aren't you? Henry is a coward. That's your fault. No, that's fate, Grant said. You don't belong there, Kelsey. You know it. You're rotting. You're a Ferrari engine stuck in a lawnmower. It's painful to watch. I do what I have to do, Kelsey whispered. Stop doing what you have to do. Start doing what you were built to do. Grant stepped closer. The space between them crackled with tension. Come work for me. Kelsey laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. Work for you. You're a shark. You destroy companies. I expose weaknesses, Grant corrected. I find the rot and I cut it out, but I need eyes that see what I miss. Tonight I missed the German variable. You saw it. I need that brain, Kelsey. I don't want your resume. I want your intuition. I can't work the hours you work, Kelsey said, her resolve wavering. I have responsibilities. I'll pay for the best private care for your mother. 24-hour nursing, the best specialists at Mount Sinai. You won't have to worry about a bill ever again. Kelsey felt the tears prick her eyes, hot against the cold rain. It was the devil's offer. Everything she needed, handed to her by the man she despised. What's the catch? She asked. The catch, Grant said, his voice dropping to a low rumble, is that you have to survive me. My world isn't a restaurant. People don't just snap their fingers at you. They try to destroy you. If you work for me, you are my property from 6 a.m. to midnight. You solve the problems I can't. You find the patterns no one else sees. He held the check out again. Walk away, go back to Queens, and look for another waitress job, or get in the car and change your life. Kelsey looked at the check. Then she looked at Grant's face. She saw the challenge in his eyes. He didn't just want an employee, he wanted to see if she could handle him. She snatched the check from his hand. I don't start at 6 a.m., she said, her voice hard. I start at 7 Cas. I have to call my mum first. Grant grinned. It wasn't a nice grin. It was the grin of a wolf who just found a partner for the hunt. Get in the car, Kelsey, he said. We have work to do. As the heavy door of the Rolls-Royce closed, shutting out the rain and the noise of the city, Kelsey didn't know that she had just stepped out of the frying pan and into the fire. Grant Caldwell wasn't just offering her a job. He was pulling her into a war, and the biggest battle wouldn't be against the market. It would be against the undeniable, dangerous electricity rising between them. The elevator ride to the 45th floor of the Caldwell-Constance building took exactly 12 seconds. For Kelsey, it felt like a lifetime. She wasn't wearing her waitress uniform anymore. At 7 a.m. sharp, a courier had arrived at her Queens apartment with a garment bag and a note from Grant. Armor. Wear it. Inside was a charcoal grey pencil skirt, a silk blouse, and a blazer that reeked of authority. When the elevator doors slid open, Kelsey stepped into a world of chrome, glass, and silence. This was the Shark Tank. The trading floor was below, chaotic and loud, but this floor was where the decisions were made. It was quiet, cold, and terrifying. Grant was waiting for her in the conference room. He was pacing, a phone pressed to his ear. Miller and Peterson were there, too. When Kelsey walked in, the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Miller looked at her with pure, unadulterated venom. So it's true. The wine girl is an analyst now. Did you bring the dessert menu, Kelsey? Kelsey didn't look at him. She placed her bag on the table and looked directly at Grant. I'm here. What's the job? Grant hung up the phone. The job is to keep me from buying a bomb. Sit down. He threw a thick dossier onto the polished mahogany table. It slid across and stopped in front of Kelsey. Project Obsidian, Grant said. It's a merger. We are looking to acquire Rutherford Mining, a lithium extraction company in Nevada. On paper, it's a gold mine. They have exclusive rights to a massive deposit. The stock is undervalued. Miller thinks we should buy it by noon today. It's a slam dunk, Grant, Miller interjected, glaring at Kelsey. The geological surveys are pristine. The EPA permits are pre-approved. If we wait, Blackwood Capital will swoop in. Grant ignored him. He leaned over the table, his eyes locked on Kelsey. I have a bad feeling. My gut says it's too clean. But the numbers say, buy. You have 2 hours to find what we missed. If you find nothing, we spend $2 billion. Kelsey opened the dossier. Her heart hammered. But as her eyes scanned the spreadsheets, a familiar calm washed over her. This was just data. Data couldn't lie. Only people could. For the next 90 minutes, the room was silent except for the turning of pages and the furious clicking of Kelsey's keyboard. She cross-referenced Rutherford's geological reports with their equipment manifest. She checked their water usage logs against the county records. Time's up, Miller sneered, checking his Rolex. Well, did you find a typo in the lunch menu? Kelsey stood up. She walked to the whiteboard and picked up a marker. The geological surveys are accurate, Kelsey said. The lithium is there. See? Miller threw his hands up. Grant, sign the deal. But, Kelsey continued, her voice cutting through the air like a knife, they can't get it out. Grant frowned. Explain. Kelsey drew a timeline on the board. I cross-referenced their equipment orders. They ordered Class 4 hydraulic separators. Those are standard for surface mining. But look at their water usage logs. She circled a number. They are using 300% more water than a surface mine requires. That indicates deep shale saturation. She turned to Grant. The water table under the mine is unstable. If they use the heavy machinery required to extract that lithium, the ground liquefies. They know it. That's why they haven't ordered the heavy excavators yet. They are waiting for a buyer to take the fall for the environmental collapse. She capped the marker. If you buy Rutherford Mining, you aren't buying a lithium mine. You're buying a massive sinkhole in the middle of the Nevada desert. The EPA will shut you down in 3 months, and the cleanup costs will bankrupt this division. Silence. Absolute, stunned silence. Grant picked up the dossier. He flipped to the equipment manifest. He looked at the water logs. He saw it instantly. It was buried deep in the appendices, a correlation that no one else had bothered to check because they were too focused on the profit margins. Grant began to laugh. It was a low, dark laugh. He looked at Miller. "You recommended this deal, Miller. You said it was pristine." I didn't see the water logs," Miller stammered, sweating. "Because you were too busy looking at your bonus," Grant snapped. He turned to Kelsey. There was no mockery in his eyes now. There was respect. And something else. Something dangerous. "Good catch, Bennett," Grant said softly. "You just earned your salary for the next 10 years. Miller stood up, his face purple. "This is ridiculous. She's guessing. We can't base a $2 billion decision on a waitress's hunch about waterlogs." "She's not a waitress," Grant said, his voice ice cold. "She's the smartest person in this room. And from now on, nothing goes across my desk until she signs off on it. Get out." As Miller stormed out, slamming the door, Kelsey felt a rush of adrenaline. She had survived the shark tank. Grant walked over to her. He was close, too close. The scent of his expensive cologne, sandalwood and ambition filled her senses. "You have enemies now," Grant murmured, looking down at her. "Miller won't forgive this." "I can handle Miller," Kelsey said, meeting his gaze. "I know," Grant said. His hand twitched as if he wanted to touch her arm, but he pulled back. "Get your coat, we're going to lunch. And we're not going to the Azure Vault. We're going somewhere where the burgers are greasy and nobody knows who I am." For the next 3 months, they were unstoppable. Kelsey and Grant became a two-headed monster of Wall Street. They predicted the tech crash of '26. They cornered the market on agricultural futures. They worked 18-hour days, fueled by coffee and a shared, unspoken intensity. But in the shadows, Miller was watching. And he wasn't just watching, he was plotting. He knew he couldn't beat Kelsey with numbers. So he decided to beat her with the one thing Grant Caldwell couldn't calculate: betrayal. November brought a bitter chill to New York City. The trees in Central Park were bare skeletons against the gray sky. Inside Caldwell Constance, the atmosphere was tense. They were in the middle of the biggest deal of Grant's career, Project Phoenix. It was a hostile takeover of a massive pharmaceutical conglomerate, Ethelgard Biopharma. It was secretive, aggressive, and highly illegal if the details leaked before the filing deadline. Kelsey had been working on the valuation for weeks. She was exhausted. Her mother had been hospitalized again with an infection, and Kelsey was splitting her time between the office and the ICU. Grant had been surprisingly tender. He ordered food to the hospital for her. He sent his personal driver to pick up her mum's prescriptions. One night, when Kelsey fell asleep at her desk, she woke up to find Grant's cashmere coat draped over her shoulders. But the warmth was about to be shattered. It started on a Tuesday morning. Grant stormed into the office, his face a mask of fury. He threw a newspaper onto Kelsey's desk. The Financial Times headline: "Blackwood Capital announces surprise bid for Ethelgard Biopharma. Beats Caldwell Constance to the punch," Kelsey gasped. "How? We haven't even filed the intent yet. Nobody knew the price point." "Someone knew," Grant snarled. "Blackwood bid exactly $1 per share higher than our maximum limit. Exactly $1. That's not a guess, Kelsey. That's a leak." He looked at her, and for the first time in months, his eyes were cold. "Who else saw the final valuation spreadsheet?" "No one," Kelsey said, standing up. "Just me. And you." "And Miller," Grant said. "But Miller has been in London for the last week. He didn't have access to the server." "Grant, you can't think." "I don't think, Kelsey. I verify." Grant pressed a button on his intercom. "Security. Bring up the IT logs for the last 48 hours. 2 minutes later, the head of IT, A nervous man named David walked in with a tablet. He refused to look at Kelsey. "Well," Grant demanded, "where did the data go?" It was sent out last night, sir," David said quietly, "at 3:14 a.m. "From which terminal?" David swallowed hard. "From Ms. Bennett's terminal. It was sent to an encrypted Proton mail address. We traced the IP. It resolves to a private server owned by Blackwood Capital." Kelsey felt the room spin. "That's impossible. I was at the hospital last night. My mom had a fever." "Were you?" Grant walked around the desk. He pulled up the security footage from the lobby. The screen showed the lobby at 3 a.m. A figure walked in. She was wearing Kelsey's coat. She had Kelsey's hair. She swiped Kelsey's badge. Kelsey stared at the screen. "That's not me. I mean, it looks like me. But I was at Mount Sinai. Check the hospital cameras." "I don't have time to check hospital cameras," Grant roared. He slammed his hand on the desk, shattering a crystal paperweight. "The deal is dead, Kelsey. $3 billion. Gone. And my reputation along with it." He looked at her with a look of betrayal that cut deeper than any knife. "I pulled you out of the gutter," he whispered, his voice trembling with rage. "I gave you everything. I trusted you with my empire, and you sold me out to Blackwood for what? A payoff? Did they offer you more?" "I didn't do it," Kelsey screamed, tears streaming down her face. "Grant, look at me. You know me. I solve equations. I don't steal." "The numbers don't lie," Grant said coldly. "Your login, your badge, your terminal, the math says you're a traitor." He turned his back to her. "Get out. Security will escort you. If you ever come within 500 feet of this building again, I'll have you arrested for corporate espionage." "Grant, please, get out!" 2 security guards grabbed Kelsey by the arms. She didn't fight them. She was in shock. She looked at Grant's back, rigid and unyielding. As they dragged her toward the elevator doors opened. Miller stepped out. He had just returned from London. He looked at Kelsey, crying and being hauled away, and then he looked at Grant. Miller didn't smile. That would have been too obvious. He just adjusted his tie and walked into Grant's office, a look of faux concern on his face. "Grant, I heard the news. What a tragedy. I always told you. You can't trust people from the street." Kelsey saw it just before the elevator doors closed. She saw Miller's hand go to his pocket. He pulled out a small black USB drive, the kind that bypasses network logs if you have physical access. It clicked. Miller hadn't hacked the server remotely. He had hired someone to impersonate her, a wig, a stolen coat, to enter the building. But the data transfer? He must have planted a script days ago. But she was outside on the pavement now, the cold November wind biting through her blouse. She had no badge, no phone. Grant had confiscated it. No money. She stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the towering glass monolith of Caldwell Constance. She had nothing left, except one thing. Grant had taught her to be a shark. He had taught her that when you are backed into a corner, you don't curl up and die. You attack. Kelsey wiped the tears from her face. Her eyes hardened. She reached into her pocket. She had managed to palm one thing from her desk before the guards grabbed her. It wasn't a flash drive. It wasn't money. It was the original handwritten receipt from the dinner at the Azure Vault. The one where Grant had signed his name. And on the back of that receipt, weeks ago, Grant had absent-mindedly written a series of numbers while on a call. It was the master override code for his personal cloud archive. He thought it was safe because he had shredded the paper. He didn't know Kelsey had kept it as a souvenir of the night they met. "You think the math says I'm a traitor, Grant?" Kelsey whispered to the wind. "Let's see what the math really says." She turned and walked into the subway. She wasn't going home to cry. She was going to the public library. She was going to war. The Queen's public library was a sanctuary of silence, smelling faintly of damp wool and old paper. It was a stark contrast to the chrome and glass shark tank of Caldwell Constance, but for Kelsey Bennett, it was the only command center she had left. She sat hunched over a communal computer terminal in the back corner, her hood pulled up to shield her face from the flickering fluorescent lights. Her hands were shaking, not just from the cold rain that had soaked through her thin coat, but from a terrifying cocktail of adrenaline and fear. She had been fired, humiliated, and framed. She had every reason to go home, curl up in bed, and let Grant Caldwell lose his empire. He had thrown her out without a second thought, hadn't he? But Kelsey looked at the blank screen and saw Grant's face. Not the angry mask he wore today, but the look of genuine respect he'd given her when they solved the Rutherford mining crisis. He was a flawed, arrogant man, but he wasn't a thief, and he didn't deserve to be destroyed by a parasite like Miller. "Okay," Kelsey whispered to herself, cracking her knuckles. "Let's see if you really shredded that receipt, Grant." She opened a terminal window. The library's internet was slow, agonizingly so. She navigated to the external login portal for the Caldwell Constance mainframe. Usually, this required a biometric scan and a two-factor authentication token, both of which she no longer had. But she knew a backdoor. Weeks ago, during a late-night session, Grant had been on a call with the head of building security. He had recited a master override code, a skeleton key sequence used for emergency lockdown protocols. He had scribbled it on the back of a dinner receipt, the very receipt from the night they met, which she had kept as a sentimental token. She pulled the crumpled water-stained paper from her pocket. The ink was smudged, but legibility wasn't an issue. She had memorized the sequence the moment she saw it. She typed, 88, 29, 04, GC Alpha Omega. She held her breath. The screen blinked black. A loading bar appeared, spinning lazily. Access denied? No, access granted. Welcome, Administrator. Kelsey exhaled, her breath fogging the monitor. She was in, but being in was only the first step. She had to find the needle in a digital haystack, and she had to do it before the noon board meeting, which was exactly 45 minutes away. She bypassed the standard IT logs. Miller would have scrubbed those. He was arrogant, but he wasn't sloppy. Instead, she went deeper, diving into the sub-basement server logs, specifically the passive heuristic monitors. These were automated systems that tracked server load and heat distribution. They didn't record what data was moved, but they recorded where the heat came from. She saw the spike. At 3:14 a.m., the server cooling fans in Sector 4 had spun up to maximum RPM. That was her terminal, but simultaneously, another heat signature flared in the London node. "Got you," she hissed. She cross-referenced the timestamp with the building's physical security grid. She pulled up the raw feed from the sub-basement parking garage. Miller had deleted the lobby footage, but he had forgotten that the garage cameras ran on a separate, independent loop for insurance purposes. She scrubbed the timeline to 2:45 a.m. A black Mercedes, license plate obscured by mud, rolled into a blind spot. But the reflection in the polished concrete pillar was clear enough. The driver's door opened. Arthur Miller stepped out. He walked to the trunk, popped it open, and handed a duffel bag to a waiting figure, a woman with Kelsey's height and build. Kelsey zoomed in. The woman pulled a blonde wig from the bag. She put on a coat identical to the one Kelsey wore. Miller handed her a key card, and, damningly, a thick envelope that bulged with cash. Kelsey felt a surge of vindication so powerful it almost made her dizzy. It was a setup, a perfect, theatrical setup. She didn't stop there. She accessed the global trading platforms, logging in with her personal portfolio account. She searched for Caldwell Constance, CS Cap, stock activity. There it was. A massive short position opened yesterday at 4 p.m., just before the market closed. The account was buried under shell companies, but the routing number traced back to a holding firm in the Cayman Islands, a firm that listed Arthur Miller's wife as a silent partner. Miller wasn't just leaking data, he was executing a short and distort. He was betting against his own company, leaking the data to crash the stock, and planning to buy it back for pennies on the dollar once Grant was ousted. He would make hundreds of millions while destroying the man who gave him a career. Kelsey checked the clock. 11:40 a.m. She pulled a USB drive from her pocket. Her entire life's work was on it, but she wiped it clean to make room for the video files and the trading logs. The download bar crawled. 40%, 60%, 90%. Come on, she begged the library computer. Download complete. She yanked the drive, grabbed her coat, and ran. The rain outside was torrential. New York City was a grey blur of traffic and noise. Kelsey didn't have money for a cab. She ran for the subway, jumped the turnstile, and endured the agonizing wait for the E-train. Every minute felt like an hour. When she finally emerged at 53rd Street, she was drenched. Her hair was plastered to her face, her shoes squelched with every step, and she looked like a madwoman. She sprinted toward the towering glass monolith of the Caldwell Constance building. The security guards at the front desk stepped forward, hands raised. "Miss Bennett, we have strict orders," one began. "Get out of my way, Jerry," Kelsey shouted, not slowing down. "Unless you want to explain to Grant why you let Miller steal the company." The sheer ferocity in her eyes made Jerry hesitate. That split second was all she needed. She ducked under his arm and sprinted for the elevators. She jammed the button for the 50th floor, stabbing it repeatedly, as if the force of her finger could make the car move faster. 50 floors up, the atmosphere in the boardroom was suffocating. The air conditioning hummed, but the room felt hot, heavy with the weight of a dynasty collapsing. 12 board members, men and women who controlled half the city's economy, sat in grim silence. At the head of the table sat Grant Caldwell. He looked aged, his usual vitality drained away. He stared at the mahogany table, his hands clasped tightly together. Arthur Miller stood at the opposite end, projecting an image of sorrowful duty. "This is the hardest thing I've ever had to do," Miller lied, his voice trembling with practiced emotion. "Grant is my friend, but the facts are undeniable. He allowed a compromised, untrained civilian access to Project Phoenix. She sold us out to Blackwood. The stock is down 14% this morning alone. If we don't act now, there won't be a company left to save." "Is there no other way?" asked Mrs. Halloway, the board's chairwoman. "I'm afraid not," Miller said, sliding a single sheet of paper toward Grant. "The SEC is already asking questions. We need to show them we've cut out the cancer. Grant must resign, effective immediately." Grant looked at the paper. Resignation of CEO. It felt like a death certificate. He felt a profound sense of failure, not just in business, but in judgment. He had believed in Kelsey. He had seen a spark in her that he thought mirrored his own, and she had played him. That betrayal hurt more than the loss of the money. He picked up his Mont Blanc pen. The nib hovered over the signature line. "For the good of the company," Grant whispered. He touched the pen to the paper. Boom! The double doors of the boardroom didn't just open, they exploded inward. The heavy oak slammed against the walls with a crack like a gunshot. Heads whipped around. Security guards were scrambling in the hallway, shouting, but Kelsey Bennett was already in the room. She was a mess. Water dripped from the hem of her cheap skirt, creating a puddle on the plush carpet. Her chest was heaving. She looked wild, dangerous, and utterly unstoppable. "Don't sign it!" she screamed, her voice cracking with exhaustion. Grant stood up, his chair scraping loudly. "Kelsey, what the hell are you doing here?" "Get her out!" Miller shrieked, his composure shattering instantly. "Security! Arrest her! She's the thief!" Two guards lunged for her. Kelsey didn't back down. She held the USB drive high in the air like a grenade. "I'm not the thief, you idiot!" Kelsey yelled, locking eyes with Grant. "I'm the security system." She threw the USB drive. It spun through the air, clattering onto the center of the massive table, sliding across the polished wood until it stopped inches from Grant's hand. "Check the timestamp," Kelsey said, breathless. "Check the sub-basement logs. And ask Miller why his wife's holding company in the Caymans just bought 100,000 put options on this company." The room went dead silent. Grant looked at the drive. Then he looked at Kelsey. He saw the desperation in her face, but he also saw the fire, the same fire that had made her stand up to him in the restaurant that first night. "Grant, don't listen to her," Miller shouted, sweating now. "It's a virus. She's trying to wipe the servers." Grant looked at Miller. He saw the sweat on Miller's upper lip. He saw the twitch in his eye. Grant picked up the drive. He walked over to the wall-mounted media console. "If she wanted to destroy us, Miller," Grant said, his voice dangerously calm, "she would have sold this to the press, not brought it to me." He plugged the drive in. The giant screen flickered to life. Kelsey had organized the files into a simple, brutal presentation. Slide 1. The setup. The video played. The garage. The rain. Miller handing over the wig and the cash. The resolution was grainy, but undeniable. The man in the video was Arthur Miller. A collective gasp swept through the room. Mrs. Halloway covered her mouth. Slide 2. The short sell. The trading logs appeared. The complex web of shell companies was peeled back layer by layer, revealing the beneficiary, A. Miller Holdings Limited. Slide 3. The execution. The server logs showed the command originating from Miller's London terminal, authorized by his personal biometric key at the exact moment the data was stolen. Grant watched the screen. His face was unreadable, carved from stone. He watched the evidence of his friend's betrayal play out in high definition. Finally, the screen went black. Grant turned slowly to face Miller. The silence in the room was heavier than gravity. It's a deep fake, Miller stammered, backing away until he hit the window. "She's a mathematician. She used AI. It's not real." "The Cayman Islands bank routing number," Grant said softly. "Is that AI, Arthur? Or if I call the SEC right now and give them that number, will they find your name on the account?" Miller opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. Grant looked at the security guards who were still hovering near the door, unsure of what to do. "Gentlemen," Grant said, his voice regaining the iron command that made him a legend. "Please escort Mr. Miller to the conference room. Detain him there. Call the NYPD and the FBI. Tell them we have a case of corporate espionage, insider trading, and grand larceny." "Yes, Mr. Caldwell." The guards grabbed Miller by the arms. He didn't fight. He just wept. A broken, greedy man who had gambled everything and lost. As the doors closed behind Miller, the boardroom remained frozen. The board members looked at Grant, then at the wet, shivering woman standing by the door. Grant looked down at the resignation letter. He picked it up, crumpled it into a ball, and tossed it into the wastebasket. Then he walked around the table. He didn't stop until he was standing directly in front of Kelsey. She was shivering violently now, the adrenaline wearing off, leaving only the cold and the exhaustion. She hugged herself, trying to stop her teeth from chattering. Grant took off his suit jacket. It was Italian silk, worth more than her car. He draped it over her shoulders, wrapping her in warmth and the scent of sandalwood. "You hacked my building," Grant said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of awe. "Technically," Kelsey said, her voice shaking, "I used a legacy code you failed to deactivate. It's a security flaw. You should fix it." "I fired you," Grant said. "I called you a traitor. I threw you out on the street." "You did," Kelsey nodded. "You were an idiot." A few board members gasped at the insult, but Grant didn't flinch. A slow smile spread across his face, not the wolfish grin of a predator, but a genuine human smile of relief and gratitude. "I was," Grant admitted. "I was an uneducated idiot. I looked at the data, but I ignored the variable of character. I won't make that mistake again." He turned to the board. "This meeting is adjourned. However, before you go, I am making an executive appointment. Effective immediately, Kelsey Bennett is the new Chief Strategy Officer of Caldwell Constance. She will have full autonomy, a seat on the board, and a starting salary of $2 million, plus stock options." He looked back at Kelsey. "Unless you have a better offer?" Kelsey pulled the oversized jacket tighter around herself. She looked at the man who had challenged her, broken her, and was now handing her the keys to the kingdom. "I want dental," she said, "and my mum gets the best care. No questions asked." "Done," Grant said, "and I'll throw in a new coat." "Then we have a deal," Kelsey said. Grant extended his hand. Kelsey took it. His grip was warm and solid. It wasn't just a handshake, it was a pact. "Let's get out of here," Grant said, ignoring the stunned board members. "I'm starving." "No fancy wine," Kelsey warned. "I've had enough of that for a lifetime." "Burgers," Grant promised. "Greasy ones, in a place where nobody knows our names." As they walked out of the boardroom side by side, the staff parted like the Red Sea. Kelsey Bennett, the waitress from Queens, walked with her head held high. She had entered the building as a suspect, but she was leaving as a partner. She had silenced the billionaire, not with a shout, but with the undeniable, unbreakable truth. And for the first time in her life, she knew that the glass ceiling wasn't a barrier. It was just another variable she had solved. What a journey! From clearing tables at the Azure Vault to running the boardroom at Caldwell Constance, Kelsey Bennett proved that intelligence and integrity are the most powerful currencies in the world. Grant Caldwell learned a lesson he'll never forget. Never underestimate someone based on their uniform. It's a reminder to all of us that when the world tells you to give up, sometimes you have to double down on the truth. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think Grant deserved a second chance? Or should Kelsey have walked away and left him to fail? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It helps us create more dramatic stories just for you. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next episode. We have a heartbreaking story of a CEO and a homeless veteran coming up next that you won't believe. Thanks for watching. And remember, your story is your power.